Anna Whitaker's marriage did not end with shouting or broken dishes. It ended with a sentence delivered calmly, almost gently, as if it had been practiced in advance. James Whitaker stood near the doorway of the Boston apartment, his coat already on, his keys in his hand. He said he was leaving because she could not give him a child. There was no anger in his voice, no cruelty he could be accused of. He spoke as though he were explaining a logistical problem that had finally reached its conclusion. He framed it as something unavoidable, biology timing reality. He said he had thought about it carefully. He said it would be unfair to both of them to continue pretending. He avoided words like betrayal or abandonment. He spoke instead of responsibility and the future, as if leaving were the most reasonable option left to him. Anna listened, stunned by how composed he sounded. She reminded him of the plans they had made together, of the years they had shared, of the doctor's appointments they had discussed, but never finished. She spoke quietly, trying not to escalate the moment, trying to meet his calm with her own. She told him there were other paths, other possibilities. She asked when he had decided this, and why she was hearing it now. James did not engage with any of it. He did not argue or defend himself. He simply said he was done. He gestured toward the suitcase by the door, as if it were proof that the decision had already been finalized. The apartment, once familiar, suddenly felt like a temporary space she was about to be evicted from emotionally, if not physically. The humiliation crept in slowly. It was not loud or dramatic. It settled in her chest as she realized this was not a conversation meant to reach understanding. It was an announcement. Her presence was not required beyond receiving the information. The disbelief followed, sharp and disorienting, as she understood that the calmness was not kindness. It was distance. James picked up his bag and moved past her without hesitation. He did not look back. The door closed behind him with a soft, ordinary sound that felt completely out of proportion to what had just ended. Anna stood alone in the middle of the apartment. The silence pressed in from every direction. The walls, the furniture, the life they had built together all seemed to confirm the same thought. This moment had been planned long before tonight. Long before Anna Whitaker became a wife, she had learned how to endure. She grew up in a modest, rural town, the kind of place where expectations were simple and opportunities limited. Education was her way out, and when she was accepted into a college in Boston, she left with a single suitcase and a quiet determination not to waste the chance she had been given. She moved into her Aunt Eleanor Grant's apartment, a small but carefully kept place in an older Boston building that carried the weight of years and routines. Eleanor was not a sentimental woman. She believed in discipline, structure, and self-reliance. Affection, when it came, was subtle. A meal left warm on the stove, a reminder to lock the door, a question asked once and never repeated. Anna adapted quickly. She studied, worked part-time, and learned how to live without asking for more than was offered. Years later, Eleanor suffered a severe stroke that changed everything. The woman who had once managed her life with precision could no longer live alone. Without hesitation, Anna stepped into the role of caregiver. She rearranged her schedule, turned down career opportunities, and narrowed her world to hospital corridors, medication schedules, and quiet nights, listening for movement from the next room. There was no sense of sacrifice in the way Anna spoke about it then. It was simply what needed to be done. As Eleanor's health declined, she insisted on putting her affairs in order. With legal counsel, proper documentation, and witnesses present, she transferred ownership of the apartment to Anna. It was not an impulsive gesture or a sentimental promise. It was a deliberate decision, made with clarity and intention. Eleanor wanted Anna to have something solid, something no one could take from her easily. After Eleanor's death, the apartment became more than a place to live. It was Anna's first true anchor. It allowed her to remain in Boston, to rebuild her career, and to live without dependence on anyone else. When Anna later married James, This apartment was already hers. He never openly challenged it, but he never accepted it either. To him, it was an inconvenience, a reminder that Anna had a foundation he did not control. This history shaped her long before her marriage began. It forged her resilience, her sense of responsibility, and her ability to put duty above comfort, qualities that would later be tested again at a far greater cost. Anna and James met through work. In an environment where long hours and shared deadlines often blurred professional boundaries, their connection formed quickly, fueled by proximity and the sense of momentum that comes when two lives begin moving in the same direction. To outsiders, they looked compatible, even fortunate. The relationship progressed fast, but not evenly. James knew how to be charming when others were watching. He was attentive at dinners, polite with colleagues, and generous with compliments in public spaces. In private, he was more reserved. Conversations rarely went deep unless they centered on his ambitions or frustrations. Anna noticed a distance early on, but she told herself it was simply his nature. They lived in the apartment Anna had inherited from her aunt. James never offered to contribute financially in a meaningful way. He covered small expenses, framed as generosity, but the larger responsibilities remained Anna's. From time to time, he would casually suggest selling the apartment. He spoke about it as an opportunity to start fresh, to buy something together that would feel more equal. Anna heard the suggestion often enough to understand that the apartment unsettled him. She responded with patience. Anna believed relationships required adjustment and compromise. When James withdrew emotionally, she compensated by being more understanding. When he avoided difficult conversations, she postponed them. She normalized the imbalance, convincing herself that stability would come with time. What she did not recognize, then, was how differently they viewed the marriage. To Anna, it was a partnership built on shared responsibility and mutual growth. To James, it was a step upward, socially, professionally, and financially. He measured progress in terms of what the relationship provided him, not what it demanded of him. There were moments that should have given her pause. His discomfort whenever legal or financial matters were discussed. His impatience when she spoke about long-term plans that did not center on him. His subtle insistence on control disguised as concern. None of it was overt enough to confront. Each instance was small, easily dismissed in isolation. Only later would Anna understand that these were not minor flaws, but patterns. Quiet warnings embedded in ordinary moments. Red flags she had learned to overlook in the name of harmony, now impossible to ignore in hindsight. Anna's termination came without warning. She was called into a small conference room late in the afternoon, after most of the office had already started shutting down for the day. Her supervisor spoke in careful, neutral language, reading from prepared notes. There had been a review, a restructuring, a reassessment of roles. Her position was being eliminated. The decision, she was told, was not personal. No specific failure was mentioned. No clear mistake was identified. The explanation was procedural, deliberately vague, wrapped in phrases that sounded final but revealed nothing. Anna listened, nodded, and signed the documents placed in front of her. She collected her belongings quietly, aware of how quickly a routine can disappear. At first, she told herself it was unfortunate timing. Layoffs happened. Companies changed direction. She tried to focus on practical steps, updating her resume, calculating how long her savings would last, adjusting her expectations. Boston was unforgiving when it came to expenses, and the numbers did not stretch far. The truth reached her days later, not through confrontation, but through fragments of information that slowly aligned. A former colleague hesitated before speaking. A familiar name surfaced in a conversation that should not have included him. James had been involved. He had spoken to her supervisor. He had framed her role as unnecessary, her performance as replaceable. It was done quietly, through influence rather than accusation. No scene, no obvious sabotage, just enough pressure applied in the right places to make her expendable. The realization did not arrive with rage. It arrived with a hollow clarity. Anna understood that the betrayal was not emotional in nature. It was administrative, efficient, designed to leave no visible trace. Her career had not collapsed, it had been dismantled. For the first time, financial anxiety settled in with real weight. Rent was not an issue, but everything else was. Utilities, insurance, daily costs that no longer felt abstract. Her savings, once reassuring, now appeared finite and fragile. What unsettled her most was the symmetry of it all. Her marriage had ended with a calm explanation that concealed preparation and intent. Her job had ended the same way. Both losses had been arranged in advance, carried out without confrontation, and presented as inevitable outcomes. Anna began to see the pattern clearly. The life she had built was not unraveling by chance. It was being taken apart piece by piece, professionally and personally by the same hand. With her marriage ended and her job gone, Anna reached for the one remaining constant she believed she had left. Victoria Hayes had been her closest friend for years, the person she trusted with details she shared with no one else. If anyone could offer clarity or comfort, Anna believed it would be her. They met in Victoria's apartment, a familiar space that suddenly felt carefully arranged. Victoria listened as Anna spoke, her posture relaxed, her expression composed. She did not interrupt. She did not rush to reassure. Her calm was steady, almost deliberate, and something about it unsettled Anna before she understood why. When Anna finished, there was a brief pause. Then Victoria exhaled softly and told her the truth. She was pregnant. The child was James's. The words landed without drama. Victoria did not cry or apologize. She did not speak of guilt or confusion. Instead, she talked about timing, about how things had developed naturally, about what made sense moving forward. She spoke as though she were outlining a plan, not confessing a betrayal. She mentioned stability, future arrangements, and how complicated emotions only made situations harder than they needed to be. Anna listened without interrupting. There was no argument, no raised voice. The absence of emotion from Victoria stripped the moment of any illusion Anna might have held on to. This was not an accident or a lapse in judgment. It was a choice that had already been integrated into Victoria's life. Anna stood up when the conversation ended. She did not accuse or plead. She did not ask when it had started or how long it had been happening. None of it felt necessary. The answers would not change the outcome. She left the apartment quietly, closing the door behind her with the same controlled movement she had watched James use days earlier. Outside, the city moved on as usual. People passed her on the sidewalk, unaware of how completely her world had narrowed. In a matter of days, she had lost her husband, her career, and the friendship she believed anchored her. The isolation settled in fully then, heavier than grief. There was no one left to call, no role left to perform. On her way home, Anna paused near the entrance of her building as an elderly woman struggled with a bag. Without thinking, Anna stepped forward to help. The woman thanked her warmly and, sensing something unspoken, offered a few simple words of kindness. She did not ask questions. She did not pry. The brief exchange was insignificant in scale, yet it stayed with Anna. It was the first moment of genuine, uncomplicated compassion she had encountered since everything began to fall apart. With her savings shrinking and no immediate prospects in sight, Anna applied for a live-in childcare position she found listed through a private agency. The description was brief, almost impersonal. 2 children, recently widowed father, long-term arrangement preferred. It promised stability, even if only temporarily. The interview took place at a quiet townhouse in a residential part of Boston. Charles Bennett greeted her at the door with reserved politeness. He looked tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep, as though exhaustion had settled into his posture and stayed there. He explained the situation clearly and without embellishment. His wife had died. He was raising his 2 sons, Henry and Samuel, on his own. The boys were present but distant. They sat together on the stairs, watching silently as Anna spoke with their father. They did not interrupt or ask questions. Their expressions were guarded, their movements restrained, as if they had learned that taking up space required permission. The house itself was immaculate. Everything had a place. Toys were neatly arranged, but rarely used. Family photos remained on the walls, untouched, forming a quiet reminder of what had been lost. The order felt less like comfort and more like control, a way of preventing further damage. Anna accepted the position without hesitation. From the beginning, she worked quietly. She did not attempt to fill the absence in the home or alter its rhythms. She followed the routines already in place, observing before suggesting changes. She spoke to the boys gently without expectation, allowing them to respond on their own terms. She did not force affection or familiarity. Over time, small shifts began to occur. Meals became less silent. The boys lingered longer in shared spaces. Henry started asking simple questions. Samuel followed Anna from room to room, not speaking but staying close. These changes were subtle, almost imperceptible, but consistent. Charles noticed as well. He remained distant, careful not to misinterpret progress as recovery. Still, the atmosphere in the house softened. The rigid order gave way to something more livable. Laughter appeared briefly, then more often. The boys slept better. The house breathed. Anna's role remained clearly defined. She was not a replacement. She never positioned herself as more than what she was hired to be. Her strength lay in consistency, in showing up every day with the same patience and steady presence. For the first time since her life began to unravel, Anna felt something shift internally. This was no longer survival. It was the beginning of cautious rebuilding, one routine, one quiet evening at a time. As the weeks passed, the boys' attachment to Anna became impossible to overlook. They trusted her in quiet, unspoken ways, bringing her drawings without explanation, sitting closer to her during meals, waiting for her presence before starting their day. With others, they remained reserved. With Anna, they allowed themselves small freedoms they had not shown since their mother's death. Charles observed these changes with mixed emotions. He was grateful for the stability Anna provided, yet unsettled by how naturally the boys responded to her. It forced him to confront feelings he had carefully kept contained. Anna did not resemble his late wife in appearance or mannerisms, but something about her emotional steadiness felt familiar. She did not rush grief or attempt to reshape the household. She simply existed within it, consistently and without demand. Evenings in the house grew warmer. The rigid routines softened. Conversations at dinner extended beyond necessary exchanges. Sometimes, after the boys went to bed, Charles and Anna would sit in the kitchen or living room, speaking quietly about ordinary things, work, schedules, the children's progress. Occasionally, deeper topics surfaced, though neither lingered on them for long. One night, after a particularly difficult day, Charles spoke about his wife. He did not recount the details of her illness or death. He spoke instead of absence, of how silence had filled spaces he did not know how to occupy. Anna listened without offering solutions or comfort she could not give. Her presence was enough. The boundary shifted in that moment, almost without acknowledgement. The closeness that followed was not planned or discussed. It did not come from desire, but from exhaustion and shared vulnerability. It happened quietly, without promises or declarations. By morning, nothing was said. There was no attempt to define what had occurred or to give it meaning. Both understood without agreement that it would not be repeated. It remained unspoken, contained within the walls of the house and the weight of what each of them carried. The emotional tone of the moment was restraint, not romance. There was no sense of beginning something new, only the brief suspension of isolation. Life returned to its routines, unchanged on the surface, yet subtly altered beneath. Anna continued her work as before. Charles maintained his distance. The boys remained unaware of the shift that had occurred. What lingered was not intimacy, but the quiet recognition of how easily lines can blur when grief and stability intersect. Anna discovered she was pregnant in a way that left no room for denial. The realization came quietly, confirmed without emotion, and followed by a long stretch of stillness in which she considered what it meant. There was no confusion about the implications. She understood immediately how this would affect Charles, the boys, and the fragile balance that had been restored within the household. The child would change everything, not only because of its existence, but because of what it represented. Anna knew that any explanation would force questions she was not prepared to answer and choices she was unwilling to impose on others. Stability, once disrupted, could not be reclaimed easily. She made her decision quickly and without ceremony. Anna gave her notice to Charles in simple terms, citing personal reasons. She did not elaborate, and he did not press. The conversation remained professional, though the restraint in his response reflected an awareness that something unspoken had shifted. Arrangements were made efficiently. There was no argument, no attempt to persuade her to stay. Her farewell to the boys was measured. She helped them prepare for school, followed their routines, and avoided drawing attention to the departure. When the moment came, she knelt to their level, spoke gently, and told them she had to go away for a while. Henry tried to be composed. Samuel clung to her without words. Anna left before either of them could ask questions she could not answer. She returned to her hometown, a place unchanged by her absence. There, she settled into a smaller, quieter life. The pregnancy progressed without incident, marked by routine medical visits and long periods of solitude. She prepared for motherhood alone, not out of pride, but out of necessity. There was no sense of abandonment in her choice, only responsibility. Anna did not frame her departure as self-sacrifice or loss. She understood it as the only way to protect what had already been rebuilt, even if it meant giving up the possibility of something more. The child grew, and with it Anna's resolve. She focused on what lay ahead, not on what she had left behind. In leaving without explanation, she accepted the cost of silence, believing it was preferable to the damage truth might cause. This was not martyrdom. It was restraint, chosen deliberately, with consequences she was prepared to carry alone. The truth reached Charles indirectly, through family connections that filled in the gaps Anna had left behind. It was not delivered all at once, but assembled from fragments, dates that no longer aligned, a sudden departure that now made sense, and a quiet confirmation he could no longer dismiss. When he understood, the weight of it settled heavily, stripping away any remaining ambiguity. Guilt came first, not sharp or dramatic, but steady and consuming. He recognized the moment when silence had been mistaken for resolution, when restraint had been misread as distance. Regret followed, not for what had happened, but for what had been left unspoken. And beneath both, clarity emerged. The decision Anna had made was not impulsive or selfish. It had been deliberate, protective, and costly. Charles did not act immediately. He took time to consider what he could offer that would not repeat the harm already done. When he finally traveled to find her, it was without expectation. He did not rehearse speeches or prepare explanations meant to persuade. The reunion was quiet. There were no raised voices or emotional displays. Anna met him with caution, her composure intact but guarded. They spoke plainly, acknowledging what had happened without reassigning blame. Charles did not ask to be forgiven. He did not attempt to justify his inaction or reinterpret the past. Instead, he spoke of commitment, clear, defined, and unambiguous. He spoke of transparency, of choices made openly rather than implied. Most importantly, he spoke of time. He understood that trust could not be requested on demand, and that presence mattered more than promises. Anna listened without interrupting. She did not respond immediately. There was no urgency in her expression, no rush to resolve what had taken months to unfold. She asked practical questions. She observed his answers carefully, weighing not just his words, but the steadiness behind them. When the conversation ended, nothing was finalized. No decisions were announced. What remained was possibility, approached with restraint. Anna made it clear that any step forward would be measured, built slowly and grounded in consistency rather than emotion. Charles accepted this without protest. For the first time, he did not attempt to shape the outcome. He understood that the choice, if it came, would have to be Anna's, and that waiting was part of what he owed her. Anna gave birth to twins in the early hours of a quiet morning, a boy and a girl. The delivery was uncomplicated, the aftermath calm rather than dramatic. She approached motherhood with the same composure that had guided her through every turning point of her life. There was no sense of arrival or victory, only the steady assumption of responsibility. The family did not come together all at once. It formed gradually, through deliberate choices and careful steps. Legal arrangements were handled properly and without urgency. Custody, residence, and long-term plans were addressed with clarity, not emotion. Each decision was made to ensure stability rather than to satisfy sentiment. Charles remained present throughout, consistent and unassuming. He did not position himself as a savior or a solution. He accepted the pace Anna set, understanding that trust was rebuilt through actions repeated over time. The boys were introduced slowly into this new reality, their routines respected, their place within the family affirmed rather than redefined. When it came time to name the children, Anna made a decision that reflected her understanding of continuity rather than replacement. The daughter was given the name of Charles's late wife. It was not an act of self-denial or symbolic gesture meant to erase the past. It was acknowledgement, a recognition that love did not need to compete with memory, and that honoring what came before did not diminish what existed now. The household adjusted. There were challenges, moments of uncertainty, and periods of quiet recalibration. But there was no chaos. The structure Anna had always relied on, routine, accountability, steadiness, held. The story did not end with triumph or dramatic resolution. There was no sense of conquest or reward. What remained was earned stability, a family built not on illusion or urgency, but on responsibility accepted willingly and without expectation of praise. Anna's journey closed where it had begun, not with romance or recognition, but with dignity, with choices made carefully, burdens carried deliberately, and strength expressed quietly. The life she now lived was not perfect, but it was honest. And for Anna Whitaker, that was enough.